So you would think that from hearing a lot of Americans, I would have an American accent, but I don't. I actually went to university in the United States, and you could clearly tell the difference between my O's and how I say out or about. I do say a lot of times, like, oh, it's cold out, eh? Like I have a very Canadian accent. I think it's a little more neutral because I am a high school teacher by profession.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. And let us know, where are you? Where are you watching this video from? And I'm excited once again because I have an amazing guest with me today. And it's interesting because I've been speaking to many people from the United Kingdom and from the United States recently, and we haven't really ventured outside to Ireland, for example, or South Africa or New Zealand, and we haven't been to Canada for a while. So that being said, Bob, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's good to be here from what we call the Great White North, which is actually white right now. There's snow all over the place. So it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Lewis.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So here in Brussels, it's cold. It snowed a little bit recently, but not too much. And usually it settles, but then it rains the next day and it's gone. So
oh yeah, that's disappointing.
yeah, like how white is it over there, and how much does it tend to snow in winter?
So we're having a pretty good winter this year. Last year was very disappointing. It was a lot of snow and then rain the next day, like what you're having. But right now it's minus 17 Celsius, and there's a little bit of snow on the ground. I wish it was a little bit more. You can see the grass kind of poking through, but it's nice and cold. I went for a walk this morning, and it certainly wakes you up quickly when it's this cold outside. So yeah, nice and cold. Frigid would be a good word. There's a good English word. Yes.
You sound very positive about minus 17 degrees Celsius. Like I wouldn't be saying the same things if it was me.
Yeah, so my family is originally from Northern Holland. They're from the Netherlands. They moved to Canada in the early 50s. And I always believe that somehow genetically I'm adapted to really cold weather. So I love winter. I love it when it's minus 10, minus 5, minus 15 to minus 20. You got to be a little cautious, but it's still enjoyable. But yeah, I love a good winter when you're warm and cozy in your house, or you can go outside and experience the snow and the cold. Yeah, no problems there.
Like, I kind of know what you mean a little bit if it's just for a few weeks, and I like being cozy indoors, watching a film with some popcorn, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't mind like wrapping up and putting a scarf on, gloves on, but I mean, it gets a bit tiring, doesn't it? After like 3 months of the same cold weather.
I would say no. There's one thing I do not like though. I don't like the short days. So in, end of December, beginning of January, it gets dark out at 4:30 in the afternoon. I do not enjoy that. But the cold, I'll take the cold for 3 or 4 months. Yeah. Give me a good solid winter with lots of tobogganing, sledding down hills, lots of outdoor walks and hikes, just lots of fun. So, yeah. But the sunshine is nice with it. Like right now it's very cold, but very sunny. And that's just beautiful. You can, fresh air, some sunshine. Yeah. I like it. So,
and you definitely appreciate it more when it is sunny and it's really cold, like feeling that like sunrise, like on your face. It's like, oh yeah, please.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and you tend to wear darker clothing in the winter just so it absorbs the sunlight. Like my winter coat is black. You can see I'm wearing a black sweater. It's like get all the heat you can from the sun. So I've always loved winter ever since I was a little kid. Yeah, just love it.
A couple of little vocabulary terms there. You said a sweater. You are wearing a sweater. However,
yes,
in British English, we would usually use the word jumper. So say jumper rather than a sweater. You can say sweater, of course, it's not wrong. Yes. And then another one is, you mentioned tobogganing and sleighing. I would always say sledging, at least in the north of England. I was like, let's go sledging. Woohoo!
Yeah, no, we would not use either of those terms. In fact, a jumper is more of a one-piece of clothing that a child might wear or something. That's what we would call a jumper. And then, sledging, no, we'll say sledding with a D. or tobogganing, because we actually use like wooden toboggans. So yes, that's yeah, it's a fun word though, isn't it? Tobogganing. If I was learning
Yeah.
English, I would
So
enjoy
many like
learning that
ups
word.
and downs, like to do the.
Yes, for sure.
Now, I've seen from your videos, and everybody I'm sure has watched some of your videos on YouTube, that you record a lot of them outside, and
Yes,
you live on a farm, right?
I do. That is correct.
Okay. What is farm life like? Because I live in the center of Brussels. Like, I'm literally surrounded by skyscrapers, or at least relatively high buildings. So, yeah, what's life on a farm like?
So I don't know what it's like to grow up in a city. So I grew up on this farm. I was actually born in a town close to here in the hospital. My mom brought me home at 3 days old, probably. And I've always lived here. I've always lived outdoors. When I went to university, I couldn't handle the sound of traffic. It took me almost a year to get used to the sound and noise of the city. So for me, what's it like living on a farm? It seems very normal. I like going out in the morning. The dogs are out. It's the nearest neighbor is quite a ways away. If he had a loud party, I wouldn't even hear him. So yeah, for me, it's quite normal. In terms of um, living on a farm, I always enjoyed growing crops. Like anytime my dad said something had to be done in the tractor, I would be the first kid who wanted to do it. Started driving a tractor at like age 8 with some supervision. So I don't know if that's legal now, but that was my childhood. So I haven't ever known anything different. And then Jen and I now we grow flowers. That's the main crop that we grow. So it's just it's nice to be out in the dirt and watering things and growing things and seeing them grow. So very normal for me.
It's perfect as well if you're recording videos that you don't have to deal with any like noisy neighbors, because at times I will be outside and then I'll hear someone
Yeah.
drilling, and then I'll hear a dog barking, then somebody will be screaming, then I can hear like the tram lines that's
Oh
just like
yes.
passing by. And it is a little bit frustrating. So maybe I should move out to the middle of nowhere and
Yes.
yeah, live on a farm.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons I started recording outside. Is my wife and I at the time, we have 5 kids. A few have moved off to university at this point, but my house was always loud. And so my first videos, I thought I'll just go outside. But the one thing I deal with that I don't enjoy is the wind. The wind can make it very difficult to record a video outside. Thankfully, technology and microphones have gotten better, but yeah, you'll hear me saying vocabulary words I don't teach online quite loudly at times outside, if you know what I mean, when
Uh,
it's really windy, because yeah, it can be very frustrating when it's windy. You probably have the same thing though in the city. Occasionally it's just too windy.
No, 100%. Like here in Belgium in general, and the United Kingdom especially, are very windy places. So sometimes it's not even that cold, but it will feel very cold
Oh,
just
yes.
because you've got this like Baltic wind coming at you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
problems that you have to deal with. Now, whereabouts in Canada are you from?
So I'm actually, well, an interesting thing is almost everyone in Canada lives within 100 kilometers of the American border. I'm actually in southeastern Ontario, close to Niagara Falls. So I live really close to the United States, like 40 minutes away from the border. I live between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. So if you look at a map of the Great Lakes, and then in the middle of nowhere between those two lakes, that's where my farm is. So yeah, I'm in the province of Ontario, in the most southern part almost. So I'm not a northern Canadian by any stretch of the imagination, but close enough to the north to have a good winter. So
In that case, does it mean that you have less of a Canadian accent? Like, could people like mistake you for an American?
no, I don't think so, which is interesting because growing up, we could get American television and American radio. So you would think that from hearing a lot of Americans, I would have an American accent, but I don't. I actually went to university in the United States, and you could clearly tell the difference between my O's and how I say out or about. I do say a lot of times, like, oh, it's cold out, eh? Like I have a very Canadian accent. I think it's a little more neutral because I am a high school teacher by profession. So I think you kind of I don't know, playing out your accent a little bit when you do a job like that. But no, certainly it's very Canadian. Yes.
No, it's interesting because as I was mentioning to you before we started recording, I had a chat with Brent a couple of weeks ago, and you know him very well and have recorded videos with him previously. And he just told me to like look out and watch out for the O sound. So when you
Yes.
say out, for example,
Yes.
or house, then there's a little bit of a difference. And it's true that now I'm really kind of zeroing in on it. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, yeah, that does sound Canadian.
Yeah. And it's interesting because people will say, well, you say out the same way you say boot, but we don't at all. Like if it's cold, I'll wear my boots. And I say that in a very Canadian way. So if I go out and about, I'll wear my boots. That's kind of the classic phrase to hear some of the Canadian accent. So I have no idea what that sounds like. It just sounds normal to me.
No, 100%. Now let's go over some kind of Canadian stereotypes, slang, and stuff like that. So first of all, when I think of Canada, I think of maple trees and maple syrup. I think of hockey, like ice hockey.
Yes.
What else? Bears and
Oh, yeah.
basically the great outdoors and lots of wilderness.
Right.
Are all of these stereotypes accurate and true?
Well, you know, something that's interesting about Canada is we have a number of large cities, but not that many. I can probably name the 7 largest cities off the top of my head. And then everything after that's quite small compared to other countries in the world. And what Canadians often do is they get out of the city. So it's very common for people to go to Northern Ontario, especially in the summer, and to have a cottage somewhere. Ontario, the province of Ontario and Quebec as well, there's a lot of small lakes. So the idea of Canadians being outside and enjoying the outdoors is very true. I do not go north in the summer because I live on a big, beautiful property, but almost everyone I know goes north in the summer on the weekends. They go to the cottage, they go canoeing, they go boating, they go water skiing. What's also true is that Canadians do hunt. I do have neighbors that regularly will go and hunt. There is, you know, if you watch my videos in the distance, there is a lot of forest and woods around me. So that's somewhat true as well. Yeah. And then things like, you know, snowmobiles go by my house in the winter because the river will freeze. So there's these, I think, even more Canadian than me, guys who don't mind putting on, you know, all the gear they need to go snowmobiling in the winter. So yeah, I think that's true. Maple syrup. Yes, we have maple syrup in our house. We eat it on pancakes. It's pretty common. So I think some of the stereotypes are true. I mean, it is a big, beautiful country with lots of open space, and there are so many maple trees. You'd be shocked in some parts of Canada.
And another typical dish is poutine. What is poutine?
So it's a common dish. It's not eaten a lot because it's not overly healthy, but it's basically French fries with gravy and then either cheese or if it's traditional, it'll be cheese curds. So it's a very, well, there's not really, besides if you count the potato as a vegetable, there's not a lot of
nutritional
vegetables
value.
in it. No, so it's not something that we make or eat at home very often, but almost every Canadian restaurant will have some version, especially if it's a fast food restaurant, some version of poutine. Maybe it has cheese curds and a bit of bacon, or maybe it has something else added to it. But yeah, that would be a pretty standard dish. Now, 20 or 30 years ago, no, I think it's relatively new in terms of a food item. But yeah, poutine, yes.
Awesome. And the other thing is bears. Like, are there a lot of bears? Could you be like walking around in the countryside and then come across a huge grizzly bear?
So where I live, there are no bears. But if you are in Western Canada, close to the Rocky Mountains, there will be a lot of bears. If you go to Northern Ontario, there will be bears, black bears. When my friends and I went camping in Algonquin Park, it's a very large park in Northern Ontario. You have to make sure you put your food, hang it from a tree so the bears can't get it. And we did see a couple bears. It was a little bit scary. There's smaller bears though out here. They're black bears, I think. But yeah, there are definitely bears in some parts of Canada.
Wow. And other things related to Canada, obviously you have Quebec which is a part of Canada where they speak French and English as well. So
That's correct.
do you speak any French, or were you taught French at school as a result of this?
Oui, j'ai pris les cours en français pendant mes années à l'école. Yes, I took French for 12 years at school. I'm actually a French teacher. It's not my native language, but that's my day job. I teach French.
Okay.
Et aussi, j'habitais à Québec pendant, il y a 35 ans, 25 ans. It's been a long time, actually. But I lived in Quebec, actually, for a year to improve my French. So I do not speak French perfectly, but I have a level B2 certification in French. So not everyone does, though. Like no one else that I know in my part of Ontario speaks French.
I'm the only Canadian who speaks French.
It just depends on what province you're in. But it's great because if you want to learn French, we have an entire province, and actually other provinces have little pockets of French-speaking people as well. So you can very easily just move to Quebec for a bit and improve your French. So yes.
Perfect. Amazing. I knew you worked in a school, but I didn't know you were a French teacher. I assumed you were an English teacher. So we can maybe discuss some Canadian slang a little bit later, but let's get into your job and your studies and everything. So first, you said you went to university. At university, what did you study and why?
So I went to university initially to study biology, and I found out quickly that biology students have to go to class 4 days a week, and then they had to go to a lab for 4 hours a week. But the French students had to go to class for 3 hours a week. And then they had to do language lab, which was learning, going and using some tape recorders and stuff to record yourself and listen to French. So I quickly shifted gears. I enjoyed French a lot. It was relatively easy for me to remember things. And I just enjoyed the classes more. So I majored in French and I majored in secondary education. So I became a certified French teacher. And I also minored in American history, which is completely useless for a Canadian. I've never used that information at all. So I am a certified French teacher. That is literally my job in my career since 1997, I think. Yes.
Perfect. When you initially started and you were doing biology, was it clear, like from the beginning, that I should change the route now and maybe drop out and change what I was studying? Like, did you know straight away?
No, in fact, I wasn't very bright because I had to go to an advisor. I had a professor who was an advisor, and he said after about a semester, he said, "Well, your grades in French class are all like stellar. And your grades in biology, you're barely passing." So he was like, "Why don't you just take French classes?" And I was like, "But what would I do?" And he said, "Well, you could be a teacher." And I thought, okay. Like I wasn't sitting there logically thinking to myself, "Oh, I'm doing well in this. I should just do this." So that was kind of a turning point for me. There's a lot more to the story than that, of course. But I think what I would call, I don't want to sound all grandiose, but I have an affinity for languages. I also do computer programming or have done computer programming in the past. I loved learning French. Just the idea of that there's something besides English that you can speak or that will make a computer do something has always been fascinating. So yeah, really enjoyed that.
Awesome. A nice phrasal verb that I'd like to add in. You said that you were just barely passing in your biology classes. So I would say you were just scraping by.
Oh,
you were
yeah.
just scraping by. Like you were just passing, but only just.
Yeah.
Perfect. Interesting. So you speak French, of course. This is your job. Are there any other languages that you've kind of dabbled with and tried to learn?
Yeah. And so this is where I hit kind of a wall. So we've always had at our high school, we always have students from China. So there's usually 7 to 10, 1 year, almost 20 students from China. And I thought, you know what? I have all these Chinese speakers in my classrooms. I should learn Chinese. And I found that I was able to memorize symbols. I was able to memorize some vocabulary, but I couldn't create the sounds that I needed to create. And I think it's related to the fact that, in life, there's things you're good at. I am not good at singing. I cannot hold a tune. And in order to speak some languages, you have to recognize how the tones go up and down or dip. And I couldn't do it. So that was, I didn't spend too much time on that. Maybe I'll do it again later, but that was a language where I thought, when you have access to native speakers, you think, oh, maybe I should practice this language a bit. So I can maybe say one or two things, but no.
Maybe you need to start doing some singing classes or singing lessons, and then this will open up the door and you'll start being able to speak fluent Chinese Mandarin.
Possibly, yes.
Who knows? Anything could happen.
Have you tried speaking Mandarin?
Not really. I think I've tried Duolingo with like every language, basically.
Yes.
But then you need to be genuinely motivated.
Yes.
So the reasons why I would start studying a little bit of Chinese is just kind of out of curiosity, but not because I want to like live or do business in China. So I'd learn a couple of phrases like the typical of like ni hao, and that's kind of it, because I just look at the learning curve and how difficult it is to get to a conversational level. And then I think, this is not for me. Whereas with like Romance languages, then I can look at it and already pronounce it more or less. So then you can get to a conversational level without trying too hard compared to Arabic, Russian, Chinese, Thai, Korean, Japanese, and so on and so forth.
I know, because sometimes when I see Italian written out, I can kind of puzzle my way through it a little bit because I know French. You can, oh, that kind of looks like that. That kind of looks like that. But hey, I liked what you said about motivation. It's often whenever students say, well, what are the two most important things to do in terms of learning a language? And I always say, make sure you have time and make sure you stay motivated. It's not directly related to, I think sometimes they want to know, what should I study? And I always think, well, if you can find the time and you can stay motivated, then sometimes what you're studying and how you study it isn't as important. Because man, when life gets busy and you're not motivated, then you just stop working on it. So,
especially with a language, knowing how many resources there are online, everything, like it's kind of served to you on a silver platter, like how to learn a language and how to immerse yourself in a language. But the difficulty is kind of sticking to a schedule, making sure that you are practicing little and often, and maybe not even little. If you're just kind of watching series, listening to podcasts, doing all of these things in English or in French or in Chinese, then you will make progress, like without doubt. So it's all there. It's just kind of having the motivation and the willpower and the structure in your routine to be able to stick to this system of learning a language and improving your language skills.
I would agree. Yes. The sticking to it. That's a great English verb. You got to stick to it.
Stick to it. Do not give up. No. Now, speaking about motivation, with your high school students who are studying French, like, are they generally speaking motivated? And if they're not, what can you do as the teacher to try to motivate them?
So it depends what level you're teaching. So in my province, you're required to take French up till grade 9, which is about age 13, 14. Past that, you can do 3 more years of French, but it's an elective. You choose to take it. So I do not find it challenging to motivate students in grade 10, 11, and 12. They've already decided, I want to learn the language for whatever reason. Some of them would like to go to Quebec or France. Some of them would like to be bilingual. So they're highly motivated. In grade 9, though, you do have to offer a balance of activities. I always compare it this way. I also teach computer classes. In computer class, we usually work on one thing for the whole 70-minute class period. In French, we work on 10 or 12 things in the same time span. So there needs to be variety. I think that's the key. It doesn't all have to be fun and games. You should do some things that are serious. I don't like some teachers who teach grade 9 French. They'll teach in a way where it's always fun all the time. And I think that does a disservice to the students because some parts of learning a language aren't fun. So, but it should have some element of fun, some element of balance between reading, writing, listening, speaking. But yeah, I think variety can just make a class interesting. You're more likely to key into, 6 of the 10 things we did today I actually enjoyed. So I would say variety, and then below that, fun. Variety first. So
Exactly. I mean, I guess having a good rapport with the students as well, and knowing that if they have a good rapport with you and they get on well with you, then they're
yes,
more likely to be eager to learn and they'll actually look forward to French classes. So this is one kind
yes.
of thing to strike that right balance between serious stuff, fun stuff, and just kind of having a good relationship with your students in this case.
Yeah, and I think this isn't my phrase, but I'll claim it. I always like to say a happy teacher can teach anything. And I think that doesn't mean you're a fun teacher. It doesn't mean you're, joking around all the time. But if you are genuinely enjoying your job and in a good mood 90% of the time, your students will respond to that. They'll, and you can tell because on the day you're in a bad mood, you can see the opposite. But if you can laugh about your own mistakes, if you can genuinely be authentic in the classroom, and if you are, in a job you enjoy and the students see that, it makes your job easier. I've seen that in my almost 30 years of teaching, that happy teachers just have a little bit easier than grouchy teachers.
No, absolutely. Grouchy is kind of very similar to grumpy or
Yes.
moody, we'd also say in the United
Yeah.
Kingdom. And you mentioned it, almost 30 years teaching in a school. You said
Yep.
from since 1997, if I'm not
Yep.
wrong.
That is correct. Yes.
How has the kind of education system, and at least your school where you've been working, changed and developed during this time? Because the way people used to learn languages is definitely not the same as the way people should or try to learn languages nowadays.
Right. I always describe it this way is I teach at a high school. High school has become what I dreamed it would become because I'm also very much someone who loves technology. So at my age, I got to see the internet born way back in the early 90s. So I know what it's like to not have the internet. And so my career has been a slow progression to having more and more technology in the classroom. More like every student has a laptop. We have really high speed Wi-Fi internet at our school. And then to be teaching a language in this era, you alluded to it earlier a bit, there is so much that you can use in terms of technology to help students learn a language. So that would be the biggest change. Students, in my opinion, have not changed. Teenagers in 2025, in my book, are the same as teenagers 25 years ago. Some people might say, oh, kids these days, but you have to think, primarily, what are teenagers thinking about? They're thinking about, will people like me? Who am I going to eat lunch with? Who do I want to impress? Does that girl like me? Like, for the most part, if I know technology is in their lives in a big way, but for the most part, I don't feel like students have changed. They still want to enjoy their day. They do want, for the most part, to better themselves by getting some kind of education. So, but I just love the technology. Like in a language class, it's just cool.
I mean, it's reassuring to know that the way that languages are being taught is actually improving, because a lot of the time we feel like technology is advancing so fast and
Yes.
institutions, in particular public institutions, aren't able to keep up with that speed. So even if they're not able to adapt as quickly as technology with artificial intelligence and all of this stuff, at least it's kind of following the same trend, I hope, anyway.
Yes, I think so. Well, I think your class at school should match life in some ways, right? Like if you, I know having phones in schools is a little dicey, a little tricky to control, but if you are going to have a phone in real life, you should be learning how to use that phone in school in certain capacities.
Exactly. Yeah, there's always a fine line,
Yes. Yes, for sure.
Okay, cool. So we've spoken about lots of different things, and we haven't mentioned your journey into teaching English online and YouTube. So
Right.
How did this all start out?
So this started quite simply because I'm a curious person. I mentioned earlier that I've always loved technology. And so basically I was at a point in my life where I thought I should learn how to make a video. So this is 2016, late 2016, early 2017. I had just gotten a new laptop, which had iMovie built in. Previous to that, I didn't have any editing software. And a year or two before, we had bought a camera that shot video. We had cameras before that shot video, but this one shot decent video. So I thought, I should learn how to make a video. So I thought, well, I'm a French teacher, but I don't want to really make videos about learning French because I'm not a native speaker. But I thought, I'm trained to teach languages. I know how to speak English because I'm a native English speaker. And then I heard a radio program while I was driving home one night from work that said, by 2025, there would be over 2 billion people actively learning English in the world. So I thought, okay, I'll make a couple English lessons. I'll learn how to put them on YouTube as well. If you're going to make a video, why not make it and put it on YouTube? So I did the whole process. I made 2 videos. I put them on YouTube. And then I was kind of done. I was like, okay, I learned how to do that. Now I know how to do it. And then a month or two later, as a family, we realized that people were watching those 2 lessons, and that's highly motivating. And then people were leaving comments, hey, you should make more. So that's how I always describe it. So I made more. And now here I am 8 years later and a lot of lessons later, and it's still just as fun as the day I started. So basically, I always say I'm an accidental YouTuber. I at my age, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to become a YouTuber. I'm going to, make English lessons and be successful. I think I was more thinking, oh, if I make these, people need these. I'm making something people need. So I kept making it.
I mean, it sounds perfect. Like it had a great response after only a couple of videos. And if people were like kind of calling for more and demanding for more, then you can't really stop with that kind of response. It's like, well, if you want more, of course, perfect. And as you said, knowing that people are enjoying what you're producing and doing is very, very motivating. And if you notice that, I don't know, you're getting more and more views and more subscribers and likes, it's like, well, actually, this is kind of going somewhere. So, of course, you have to continue.
Yes. And especially when things really start to take off. So I was on a field trip in June of 2019. So I had been putting videos up on and off for, I guess, a little over 2 years. And we were at an amusement park, with roller coasters and everything. And I kept looking at my phone because one of my videos, I thought something was broken because it was getting so many views. I was like, and so it was the day where I realized, okay, I really want to do more of this because there's way more people in the world learning English than I realized, and way more people on YouTube. It's hard to imagine more than 10 or 20,000 people. Like, I don't think our brains could really fathom that many people. So when I saw those kinds of views coming in, I thought, oh man, okay, I'll do even more of this.
And was there anything special about that video that kind of blew up and took off?
So it was one of my first videos where I acted out the meanings of phrasal verbs. And I realized that YouTube is very visual. So the more you can communicate through action or through a bit of humor, that, if you watch my Friday lessons where I sit in this room and I teach some vocabulary, they're very straightforward and very teacher-like, very classroom-like. I enjoy them. People enjoy them. But when you go outside and when you add a little bit more to the lesson or video than you would in a classroom, people really enjoy that. So they're in, I always say it's 90% lesson and 10% vlog, or 90% lesson and 10% me being goofy, or whatever the idea is there. But that's what I learned from that. The first video that took off was me teaching English and being a little bit silly while acting stuff out. So I've done a few more like that, but I mean, you can't make every lesson that way. So
no, exactly. You can't be goofy, or as he said, silly all the time. And I think it's funny for people to see this, and it makes it also more entertaining for the viewer if you can see people acting different things out.
Yes.
And I sometimes try to do a similar thing, but it usually means that it takes a lot longer to record the video.
Yes.
So then if you're balancing having a family, a 9 to 5 job, and all of these different things with trying to make regular, entertaining, fun, high production value YouTube videos,
Yes.
it's a little bit tiring. So how do you do it? How do you fit it in?
So first of all, I don't teach full time anymore. So I teach 70%. So I do have to be at work from about 8 o'clock in the morning till about 2 in the afternoon. So I do have the luxury of I can come home and I can focus on YouTube for another 2 or 3 hours. The other thing is I've always tried to be as efficient as possible with my time. And I think my personality and the development and production cycle of making a video are kind of in tune. I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging, but you also have to realize, like, I started YouTube with over 20 years of experience as a teacher, making a lesson, delivering the lesson 3 times or 4 times a day for 90 days, and then you repeat for another semester. So I think I have a bit of an advantage in that I'm not a craftsman, but I'm well versed in how to come up with an idea, turn it into a lesson, and then the video part is what's new. But the other part I was doing all the time. So I think teachers have a bit of an advantage on YouTube, that they're already in this hamster wheel. There's another good reference of make a lesson, deliver the lesson, make a lesson, deliver the lesson. So for me, making a lesson once or twice a week wasn't too much more work. I mean, it is a lot of work, but I wasn't stressed about it. Let's put it that way.
No, you use a nice phrase. I like to be well versed in something is to be kind of gifted with something, to know how to do something very well. And
Yes.
I agree that if you are a teacher, it's not always natural for teachers, but I think you get used to using your voice, changing the
Yes.
intonation, the tone, so you
Yes.
become a better public speaker. You are always in front of a group of people who might be
Yes.
judging you, just like people on YouTube can also be judging you, but using like the jazz hands as well
Yes.
and turning it on. So when I'm not recording, I'm very monotonous.
Yes.
And then when I start recording, it's like, hello, everybody. How
Yeah.
are we today?
Yeah. My family always jokes that I have my voice and then I have my teacher voice. So there is some truth to that my viewers as well will ask, do you always speak this slowly and clearly? And I always respond by saying, I think this is how, when I'm starting a class in the morning, I'm going to speak with a little bit of a different cadence and rhythm, and I'm going to overemphasize certain things. I always say it's like some of the things I say are in bold, but just my voice is, so yeah, I appreciate that. What you said is definitely true. Like, in addition to planning lessons, I have been talking in front of people for a very long time. So I like that as well. And you have a thick skin when you're a bit older. Like, some of my negative comments, sometimes when I read a negative comment on YouTube, I think, first of all, there's a couple of mistakes in there. And then I think maybe the person didn't mean it this way because their English isn't good enough to say it clearly. So it came off maybe as rude. So I always give them the benefit of the doubt. I always think, they were probably trying to say something nice and it just came out wrong because maybe their English level isn't good enough to express it that way. So anyways, I think I'm getting a bit off topic there.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. All of this is with the intention of people getting to know you a little bit more and also having this interview and listening practice. And I'm curious, given that you mentioned that you have 5 children, right?
5. Yep.
Okay. What do they make of the fact that Dad is a very popular YouTuber?
So I always say it's not like being a rock star,
But kind of.
it is a little strange when, I have been recognized in public, but only about 9 or 10 times. But it's usually when I'm with my children. And so I think they find that a little funny, but also a little strange. If I go to Toronto, my wife and I went to see a basketball game last week. And as I was getting off the train, somebody just said, "Hi, Bob." And I have no idea who they were. When we were at IKEA a month ago, a gentleman walked by, and then he walked by again. And then he walked by again. And then finally he said, "Are you Bob?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he wanted a selfie with me. But that's pretty rare, actually. Like, I'm not trying to say, oh, everywhere I go. But my kids in general, I think, are very proud of me. But it does sometimes lead to maybe kids bugging them at school a little bit. You know, how teenagers and kids can be like, oh, your dad's a YouTuber, blah, 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 that kind of thing. But generally, I think they think it's pretty cool. But who knows?
No, for sure. You can ask them later. It's like, kids, do you like the fact that I'm a YouTuber or not? And you can get to the bottom of it.
I'll probably find out what they really think when they're in their late 20s, and then they're honest with me. So, but at this point, you'll notice I don't feature them in videos very often, like maybe 1 or 2 videos out of all of the lessons I've made. Maybe you'll see one of my children. And I just kind of respect that. Like, I don't want this to turn that into, you know, oh, let's learn about kids and here's my kids. So,
no, I think that's understandable and probably the right kind of tactic moving forward.
Sure.
I think I stumbled across a post or a video of you responding to people asking you like, oh, why don't you just do YouTube full time? So why don't you just do YouTube full time?
Yeah. So here's the main reason is that if I don't go out in the world, I won't have as many ideas. If I don't have English conversations regularly, I won't hear the strange phrase that someone uses. And then I always look at it like this, like I have a conversation and it's all research. And it's like, oh, you just said, hold your horses. And then it's like, oh, can I make a whole lesson out of that? So for me, going to work every day is fulfilling. I do enjoy having a job. I enjoy having colleagues, but I also just enjoy living a life that allows me to borrow from that life to make English lessons. If I just sat at home in this room, within a year, I think my lessons would become a little more boring. I think it would be a little tricky. The second thing is, in order to do that, I would probably need to have like an online English academy and offer courses. But I get my fill of teaching in a classroom with people who are actually sitting in front of me. And if we hadn't had the pandemic, I think I might have become an online teacher. But the experience of being forced to teach my students online during that period made me really value, it's just nice when you're right there and I can ask you for the assignment and we can look at it together. Like, so I think that's where I'm at. I need to live a rich, full life in order to create rich, full English lessons on YouTube. And if I'm going to teach, it's going to be in person. I just prefer that. It's just, yeah, it's unfortunate for the people around the world who might want to take lessons from me, but yeah, you can't do everything. So
exactly. Who knows in the future? Never say never,
right.
You know?
That's correct. Yes.
Excellent. So anyway, before we finish it off, I mentioned Canadian slang at the beginning, kind of teased at it. I know 0 Canadian slang, so I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit.
Sure.
Could you teach us a couple of phrases or words that are common in Canadian slang?
So I think probably the first one that comes to mind is if something's difficult in life, we might say it's tough sledding. So tough sledding is any time, obviously, if you were out with a sled, for some reason, it's difficult to get the sled to move forward. But we'll use that in life as well. We'll just say, tough sledding. Like if someone said to me, my wife and I, we're not getting along. We're going through a bad patch in our marriage. I'd say, that must be tough sledding. Basically saying, that must be challenging for you. That must be a little bit difficult. I'm trying to think of another one. We would probably use things like when I'm really busy, I'm snowed under. Like the winter comes into our language, tough sledding, snowed under. And I'm kind of drawing a blank. I'm trying to think of any other ones.
To draw a blank is a lovely idiom at the same time anyway. So
yes,
if you're drawing a blank, you're kind of trying to think of something, but you're not able to come up with anything. You are drawing a blank.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So, but those two, I would say snowed under, which I think is universal. I think most English language speakers around the world, but tough sledding is probably, we use things like you're skating on thin ice, which means, if I'm like talking back to my boss a lot, to the point where he might get angry. Someone might say, whoa, slow down, you're skating on thin ice. So I think there's a lot of winter references definitely in our language. And again, common in other parts of the world, but maybe just used more in our country because it's a little colder.
I don't know, 100%. I mean, the other two that you mentioned, to be snowed under and to be skating on thin ice, I think are relatively universal, but the
Yes.
tough sledding thing, that I've never heard it in my life. So I imagine,
Yes.
well, I hope anyone watching this video or listening hasn't found it tough sledding.
Right. Hopefully it's been good. Yes. Easy to understand. Yes, for sure.
Excellent. So yeah, on that note, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you have any doubts about the vocabulary and stuff that we've used during the chat, let me know in the comments as always. And yeah, Bob, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're very welcome. It's been very enjoyable. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So yeah, see you in the next video, everybody, and have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.